Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to pressing issues, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers.
In each episode, we will cover topics including legislation, leadership, and the agricultural lifestyle. So be sure to subscribe to The Rancher's Voice everywhere podcasts are featured. If podcasts aren't your thing, watch us on the Montana Stockgrowers YouTube channel.
Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, Capital Edition. I'm Rayleigh Honeycutt, Executive Vice President of the Montana Stockgrowers Association, and today I am joined by Ellie Brighton from our team. It's been a while since both of us have been on the podcast.
Yeah, we're back at it.
Both of us have kind of been running in different directions over the last couple months, two different sets of trips to Washington, D.C., as well as all of the legislative session and bills. And so happy to be back and recording this update for folks. Let's kick it off with, speaking of Washington, D.C., Ellie just spent the last week in D.C. with some meetings and hearings and congressional visits.
Yeah.
So overall, how are things in Washington, D.C.?
It was good. The weather was good, which was nice. It was actually colder there than it is here, which I thought was interesting. The vibe is very different, I would say, than it was last year when we were there. People seem to be more, excited about the things that they're able to do. It's less of a, we got to work within the system. It's more like, how are we going to change the system? So I think that is super encouraging for us in the ag industry right now. That's a great thing. Multiple people said, like, what do you want done? Send us a list. Send us a list. So I thought that was also a really great thing, a positive attitude there. So it was a good, productive week, I think.
Yeah, sounds like a carryover from when we were there back in March. Did you see cherry blossoms?
A few. I took a couple pictures, but not nearly what I think there was the week before. What everybody said was the week before I was there was like peak cherry blossom, and then there was a rainstorm. So, but all the buildings were still decorated with like pink trees
For the Cherry Blossom Festival.
So it's kind of fun. Springy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you were out there as part of Public Lands Council's fly-in, as well as some NCBA meetings for our region. And you kicked it off with some agency updates and things like that. So do you want to give our listeners a little bit of an update on what you heard from the different agencies as they provided updates?
Yeah. So the Public Lands Council legislative fly-in basically is a day of briefings from a whole bunch of different people. So as far as agencies go, off the top of my head, we heard from USDA APHIS, BLM, Forest Service, and then we also heard from congressional staff. So I think it was House Natural Resource Committee, Senate Energy and Natural Resource, and then Western Caucus staff as well. So kind of from a variety of different people on a variety of different topics, which was super interesting. Across the board, I would say priorities are permit reform in their different fonts, depending on what agency you're in. And I think the agencies are aware of that and want to work on it. And then congressional offices are also pushing it as well. So I think we will see permit reform in different ways. Also Endangered Species Act reform, same thing. Definitely more coming from congressional staff, but agencies are aware of the fact that might come and how that's going to impact decisions in the future. Wildfire was a big topic of conversation. As we all know, last year was a terrible year for wildfires, and so it's top of mind, and I think it's top of mind for the administration as well. So I think we'll see a lot of good things there. I did find it interesting, like BLM said that they have tiers of executive orders, so their priorities are kind of tiered. So for example, in tier 1 of their executive orders is the public lands rule. The Conservation and Landscape Health Rule was the formal title that BLM rolled out last April when we were in DC, actually. And that is going to be rolled back in the next week, probably in a matter of days. That was tier 1 to get that pulled back. And then second tier, among other things, of course, but as it relates to us. And then second tier was grazing rules and regulations that they've been working on for years are in that as well. So we should see some changes and movement there. So
awesome. Another big priority that we've seen from DC is around taxes.
Yes.
We have, and maybe we should do like a rundown of the tax bills in one of our upcoming session or episodes. But estate tax, death tax, bonus depreciation, all of those have kind of bill language now introduced tied to all of those. And obviously from the Trump administration, that's a really high level priority for them. So what did you guys talk about or hear related to those topics?
Yeah, so there's the Death Tax Repeal Act, and there is a House bill and a Senate companion bill as well, both introduced, so making progress. I would say kind of what I was told was the White House wants the estate tax gone, but the reality of a full repeal is probably not going to happen right now, but they will try to obviously walk it back and keep those reductions in place that are set to expire. I mean, the other point that was made that I hadn't heard this stat before, but I thought was interesting, was that the impacts to repealing the death tax on the federal budget are only 0.1%. So it's a very small amount of the federal budget. So kind of the argument that it's going to have an effect on our bottom line when we're already in debt is kind of a fake argument, really, statistically speaking. So, but yeah, there's a few other pieces in that Death Tax Repeal Act that are really important that hit on bonus depreciation, hit on, well, I guess there's a whole other bill actually called the Main Street Tax Certainty Act, and that one basically makes qualified business income maintaining the tax deductions. So a couple different things moving there, but I think the goal is to cover all the different areas that impact estate tax.
Yeah, and obviously from our standpoint, and as part of the Producer Profitability Initiative, this is one of our number one priorities as we continue to go through 2025, is really advocating for our members and ranchers across Montana as well as the country on making sure that tax climate remains the same or provides a better environment than we have in years past.
And I think we're in a good place to be doing that. I think we have allies across the board there in DC, so that's awesome.
Yeah, and then kind of to wrap up your trip, I was really excited for you, and you had access to the BLM director's confirmation hearing that was scheduled, and then last minute was canceled and she withdrew her name. So
yeah,
how did that all kind of happen?
Yeah, so we hoofed it to the hill and got through security into the hearing room, sat down. It was absolutely packed. There were groups of people in like t-shirts, like there were all kinds of people. And then
like activists or like anti,
like public lands activists.
Okay.
Not Public Lands Council, other public lands activists. And the chairman started talking and he was saying we have these 3 people up because it was Kathleen Scamma for BLM director and then a couple other energy secretaries. And then he's like, and Kathleen has withdrawn her nomination, so she will not be here today. And you couldn't see the witnesses from where we were sitting, so we didn't know that she wasn't there when we walked in. And then immediately the activist groups got up and left. And I sat for a few minutes to see what else would happen, but they didn't say anything else, and they started it on the hearings of the energy secretaries. So
very unique situation there.
Yes. So I was really bummed because I was super excited to listen to that hearing. And it was in Senate. I don't know if I already said this, but it was in Senate Energy and Natural Resource, which has a good group of senators on it that know a lot about natural resource issues. And so I thought it was going to be a great hearing, but
well, we will anxiously wait a update from the administration on who their next nominee might be. Well, you were in DC, Ellie. I was back in Helena, and actually it was a fairly light week for us because the Senate kind of took on House Bill 2, which is the state's budget. So they did a lot of Senate Finance and Claims meetings. They did a full day floor session related to just getting bills going and moving. I think from indicators that I'm seeing, we are probably nearing or getting close to the end of legislative session. Unless something crazy happens, I don't believe that they'll use their full 90 days. And so last week, we kind of started seeing them kind of wrapping up from a fiscal standpoint, and we're starting to see a lot of confirmation hearings. So seeing those things again this week as well.
Yes.
So to kick it off, like I mentioned, we went in and supported a lot of confirmation hearings last week. This week, we will have 2 more confirmations that MSGA will stand in support of. Department of Agriculture's appointee, Jillian Street, as well as FWP's director, Christy Clark. Their confirmation hearings are this week. And then we also have a variety of different bills up as well. And some of those are related to tax. Actually, a lot of those are related to tax. So we have business equipment tax. We've have some other.
Which we've talked on, I think, twice already or 3 times already this session. So,
Yep. And then we have additional tax bills for property tax relief that we're monitoring or testifying on. What's really challenging is that there's still quite a few different bills at play, and they haven't went into a conference committee or anything to determine or negotiate. And so we're not really sure what the end product's going to look like yet. But
I don't think anyone is.
Yeah.
I haven't heard from anyone that has a clue.
Yeah, so that's a big question for us as we kind of monitor this week, is like, where will all of the tax bills kind of end up, and in what shape will they look?
Yeah. How will we combine different ones?
Yep.
Yeah. And then we have a couple resolutions also this week, and resolutions are just, I don't know, again, if we've touched on this before, but resolutions are basically saying, the state of Montana has this opinion on this issue. And usually kind of at the end, it requires them to write a letter to our congressional delegation or maybe some federal agencies and that sort of thing. So we have a few this week. One to kind of change federal firefighting policy, saying that we support quick action and common sense firefighting approach. Another one for brucellosis vaccines, kind of encouraging us to look into expanding access for brucellosis vaccines for producers. And then one just a general support of Montana beef producers. So
yeah, and then last but not least, we do have an update regarding the Montana Cattle Committee. So an interim study bill has been introduced. It's being carried by Representative Eric Tillman, and that bill will have a hearing later this week. What this bill does is that it is asking for the legislature to do a study within its interim between the two legislative years to determine what a cattle assessment might look like for cattle producers. So that language just became available, but we'll be monitoring that closely as it goes through the process.
Well, that's all we have for you this week.
Yeah,
Tune in next week. We'll have more for you.
Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.